Are you living debt-free? Now, before you tune out and take a good nap, this is not a stewardship sermon. The debt that I'm talking about has nothing to do with how you manage your finances. Instead, I'm talking about a debt that you didn't sign up for. There was no paperwork involved with it. You actually inherited this debt from your parents, yet another thing to hold over them. Problem is, then they can say, well, I inherited it from my parents. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve. We can always pass the buck on this one. That is, until we look at our lives and realize, well, I didn't exactly help the debt problem. I'm talking about the debt of sin. See, the reality is we are all born sinful. We're all born with a debt that is impossible for us to ever pay. I think we can all agree that each and every day of our lives we seem to add on to the debt of our sin, don't we? I think we can all acknowledge that really it's a debt that if it truly was hanging around our neck and was something that we had to repay, we'd throw up our hands and say, we can't do it. There is nothing you can do today, tomorrow, or in the entire life that God has before you that will ever be enough to repay the debt of your or my sin. No matter how many good deeds you do, they won't even scratch the surface. It's for that reason that Christ's sacrifice for you and for me upon the cross should be the most important driving force in our lives, because there is no hope outside of it. Then we should appreciate the story of the wealthy man whose debt is forgiven completely in a profound way, because the one whom we owed the debt to paid the whole thing in full. And yet the reality is, do we actually allow our hearts to live in that kind of freedom? Do we actually, in our day-to-day lives, live as those whose debt has been paid absolutely in full? The fact that one of the sins we commit the most is our own shame and guilt. Oh, those words, you are forgiven, that's good for the person that sits on the right side of the church, but we won't talk about the leftists among us. So when I ask, are you living debt-free? Not saying, are you debt-free? Are you living debt-free? I'm challenging you to look inside your heart and ask yourself, are you like that first servant whose debt was wiped clean? Could you imagine being so behind in life that you just kind of throw up your hands and I can't imagine how I'm going to get out of this, only to have someone come up to you and say, here's a blank check. This thing won't run out and it doesn't expire. That's what the King does for this servant, and that's what Jesus does for you and for me each and every day, isn't it? How often do we see that, where we seek to hold somebody else's debt of sin, their mistakes in this life against them, and because, well, we know the forgiveness of God, we cast judgment on the people that don't. And what would change in that messaging if we sat there and said, don't worry, your debt has been paid in full into, and here's how you know. Deliver us from our trespasses first, as we forgive those who trespass against us. The forgiven forgive, because they know the power of being debt-free. Because when Jesus looks at you and I each and every day and he says your debt is paid in full, he means your debt. If you want to know how to change this community in our door and the community outside of them, then it is to be those who live debt-free. Because that is who you are and who God desires for them to be. Amen.